Hey everybody, it's Chuggaaconroy, and this time I've decided to team up with the guys at GameXplain to take a closer look at the new gameplay trailer for Monolith Soft X. There's a ton of subtle info to absorb here, which makes it look like a spiritual successor to Xenoblade Chronicles for the Wii, if not a sequel. Luckily, they're letting me borrow the old analysis machine to truly see just how many secrets and details this trailer might be hiding. Of course, be sure to watch the previous 2 analysis videos on X that we'll be referring back to from time to time. Let's not waste any more time and dive right in. One of the first things to note is just how similar the combat shown here is to Xenoblade. There are differences of course, but most of them seem to expand on the battle system from there. Right away we can see that Battlestar Affinity is returning. In Xenoblade, this would reward players with a higher chance of critical hits as well as greater accuracy. All that was required was good timing when pushing the B button soon after the start of a battle. Players are even awarded with a fun bit of English this time, with huge succeeded flashing across the screen. The enemy they're starting the battle with also resembles a Gogol from Xenoblade, though thanks to Sakura and Gasenko on GameFAQs, we can see that the translated Japanese text refers to the monster as Bronze Simius. The bigger version of this enemy that's fought later in the trailer seems to be called Iron-Fisted Bruno. This may be a unique monster as they were in Xenoblade. They consisted of a proper name, such as Bruno right here, and a title, which would be Iron-Fisted. An example of this in Xenoblade is the immovable Gonzalez on Bionis' leg. At any rate, back to the Bronze Simius enemy, it has a red icon next to its level on the HUD. In Xenoblade, this would mean that it's an enemy that attacks first if it sees you and is drastically higher level than your character. That's not the case here. Either the red coloring means something completely new, or this trailer is being aided in some way by a debug mode. The alternate meaning for the red icon pretty much is confirmed since another monster in the background has it as well despite only being level 4. But with such limited information, it's difficult to say what it could mean. However, another element that works just like in Xenoblade is that you don't need to be right next to enemies in order to attack them. As long as you're in the general vicinity, your commands will hit. That's not to say positioning isn't important though, since we can see the text stating side middle near the command bar. This states your position in relation to your enemy and is vital for art usage. Certain arts, or special attacks, do more damage based on your positioning. In Xenoblade, it only kept track of your positioning of front, behind, or to the side of the enemy, but X also seems to track the height as well. At various points throughout the trailer, we see the text for the middle change to high or low. High when the main character uses an art that launches him into the air, and low when he takes on a giant beast on foot. This could also come into play when flying in dolls or maybe even fighting on a slope. We get hints of this in the trailer as well. Early on, the main character performs an art in a way that did more damage than usual, possibly from being in the proper position for that move. This is confirmed by the damage numbers having a more vibrant appearance, just like in Xenoblade, which easily conveys this at a glance. Interestingly, in Xenoblade Chronicles, this would raise your chain attack gauge. Being a major part of the battle system there, it seems to be completely absent here. There's no sign of the gauge, and it looks like nothing else happens except for the increased damage. It's likely chain attacks have been reworked or removed. It's also worth noting the chain attack icon depicted a trinity of party members, but now there are obviously 4 characters in the player's party. Is it possible that keeping your party at 3 is what triggers the return of this gauge? At several points throughout the trailer, we can see the Burst Affinity command pop up, and it looks to work just as it did in Xenoblade. If done correctly, Succeeded pops up on screen. This also seems to heal the player, which appears in green text. The Burst Affinity command was another mechanic from Xenoblade that would provide bonuses in battle. There, if you were able to time your button presses right on the rim of the circle, you would receive an even bigger bonus. But X seems to be more forgiving with this. Hitting the button in the gold area rewards you with a huge succeeded message, while the blue area only shows a succeeded message. Another callback is how the player uses healing arts with his machine gun. This is extremely similar to how Charlie used healing abilities with her rifle, but it's also worth noting that when healing, a fire icon with an up arrow appears next to the whole party in the HUD. It's likely that this is how the game shows tension, since in Xenoblade Chronicles, it was shown by flames in the portraits. There was even a skill in Xenoblade that caused tension to rise upon healing, so maybe this is a new version of that. But what's really odd is the ability raises player 2's tension, but doesn't actually heal her at all. Is it possible she was out of range, or is something else going on? Along with all the similarities to Xenoblade Chronicles, we also get an updated look at the HUD. On the top left, we can see the party data, but what's really intriguing is what we pointed out before. There are 4 party members instead of 3. The only time we saw 4 party members in X before this point was in the E3 trailer, but that was only for a single shot. Could it really be true that there are advantages and disadvantages to having either a 3 or a 4-person team, or is this simply a new standard? We also see the portraits of these 4 characters are now included on the HUD. It looks like the player character is the same one that's been shown off in previous trailers, and none of the others are the Shulk lookalike, who hasn't been seen since the debut trailer. But that's not all, we can see the player information has been tweaked for X. Though there are some mainstays like HP and character levels, we have no idea what rank could possibly mean. It's also worth noting that the HP bar is blue when the character's health is full. It only becomes gray when any amount is lost. It's a clever way of allowing players to quickly see the status of their party. Less obvious, though, is how exactly the doll fuel bar works. In previous trailers, the doll fuel bar was next to the minimap and would constantly drain as it was flying around. That doesn't happen here. Instead, it seems to be connected to a player's TP. Certain arts use TP, and this is the bar that drains. The amount within the bar also increases once the character enters their doll. But what could this possibly mean for the battle system? It's still unknown. The characters' levels also seem to have a wide spread despite their ranks all being the same. Oddly, player 4 at level 26 has more HP than player 2 at level 35. All their doll feeler TP seems to max out at 3000 despite the huge gap in levels. The rest of the HUD has also been updated since the last trailer. The minimap is no longer translucent and is far more detailed, showing off the landmasses you'll be traveling across. The in-game clock has also been slightly updated, with the enemy health bar now appearing at the top rather than below the players on the top left. The art icons have been modified from a square shape to Xenoblade circular color-coded icons and recharged just like before. We can even see descriptions of all the arts below. And thanks once again to the guys at GameFAQs or GameFAQs or however you say it, we can see exactly what each art does. Right at the beginning of the fight, the player has the option to draw a blade. This description states the obvious that this draws the weapon against the target. The first art he uses is called the Rising Blade. It's an attacking art that targets a single enemy and seems to inflict greater damage when the enemy is attacking you. Next up is Burning Sword, which also targets a single enemy, but this time the damage increases when used after melee type arts. The next attack art is the Blade Cyclone, which targets all enemies within a range around the user. Interestingly, if an aura is in effect, this will regain TP as well. Auras were also part of Xenoblade Chronicles' battle system. They were passive effects that would go over time as you were in battle. After that is an art called Aggressive Mode. It can only be used on the one performing the art and cost 1000 TP. It looks to be a buff that increases your attack power while decreasing your defense. Oddly, it has some notes about aura level +1 and an effect length extension. Maybe it also increases the user's aura duration and makes the effects last longer? The next art is called Advance War, not the series on the Game Boy Advance, is also limited to only yourself and cost 1000 TP. However, it increases the damage from automatic attacks your character performs while also recovering HP over time. Like Aggressive Mode, this also notes aura level +1 and an effect length extension will occur. Final art used by the player while on foot is called Wide Missile. It targets a single enemy and damages them while inflicting a status called Heat Resistance Down. We're not exactly sure what heat refers to exactly, but it's obvious that this is a debuff. And we can see that the arts are color-coded. Red means that they're attacks, blue icons are buffs, yellows are debuffs. When the characters are afflicted with one of these statuses, it appears next to their level and rank. It also uses 3 separate columns to show buffs, debuffs, and tension all at once. When the enemy is inflicted, it appears below its health bar and is lined up vertically. What we're unsure of is the green land slowly filling up around each of the arts. Perhaps they can be charged so they're more powerful, or maybe you can use them twice in a row? But those aren't all the art shown in the trailer. Partway through fighting the Bronze Simius, the player climbs into his doll and gains a completely new set of arts to reflect this. It's worth noting that emerging from the doll does not break combat, but in order to take on Bruno, Draw Blade must once again be selected. The first art the doll uses is called Stinger Missile. It targets a single enemy and causes heat attribute damage. It also mentions a status called Torrid. Whatever heat may refer to, it may have a major place in battle. The next art used is called Shield Code, and it's a buff that only affects the user, increasing the player's accuracy. After that is Multi-Missile, a simple attack that targets a single enemy while inflicting heat damage. The final art used is called the Gatling Fire, and it targets an enemy within a line. Look at the actual animation. We can see the doll shooting in a horizontal arc. Presumably, any enemy caught within the crossfire will take damage. The description also notes that this art causes beam element damage and has a chance of inflicting the break status. But there's one more art the player uses before the end of the trailer. That's the OC gear that consumes 3000 TP. The description doesn't provide much information on it, only saying that it triggers the OC gear for a fixed period. However, we do see the damage that the player deals out is massive, so it powers you up for a short time. Maybe OC stands for overclock? And while we don't see it being used, the doll has a similar option called HD gear, but this consumes all TP. Gasenko on GameFAQs believes that the HD could stand for hyperdrive. The HUD also tells us what the dolls the characters are using are named. It appears that players 2 and 4 are using a model called the Inferno, while the main character and player 3 are using something called a mass production type doll. What's interesting is that this isn't like Xenogears, where each character had their own unique mech. It appears that in X, any character can be placed in any type of doll that you desire. Okay, we're almost done with the HUD, except something odd happens to it during the fight with Bruno. The combat information completely disappears for a moment, then the main character in player 2 returns soon after, followed by everything else. Is this just a glitch, or did something happen in the game? But there are even more mysteries related to the combat. For instance, after using the aggressive mode art, the player switches to a Gatling gun. He's not using an art, so what caused the weapon to change shape? Was it maybe his distance, or the player can control what form the weapon takes? Then there's the fact that the doll fuel/TP bar begins recharging as he uses the gun. Maybe in addition to generating less aggro on the enemy like in Xenoblade, regular attacks also refill your TP. This is supported by the fact that TP never regenerates when the player uses arts, even ones that don't consume TP. And speaking of TP, player 2 is significantly less than the rest of the party throughout the entire trailer. This could imply that she's either a weapon switcher or a healer. Throughout both fights, there's a warning indicator below the arts. Because it doesn't appear until the monsters start fighting the party, it likely serves as an indicator for when the party is spotted. But there's also red text above the monster's health bar during the fight. It changes periodically, which likely means that these are the attack names for the Bronze Simius and the Bruno. The attacks they use are Punch, Deceptive Tail Attack, Rock Throw, Kong Gatling, Furious Megaton Punch, and Howl. When the player enters the doll, which we can see is done by pushing the Y button nearby, the amount of HP and TP changes on the character. The maximum amount of TP actually increases when a doll, as well as increasing the overall amount. It could be possible the characters only carry so much TP for themselves, and whatever is still left in the doll's tank is added to whatever they currently hold. But what's truly odd is that the doll has significantly less health than the player, dropping from 6,477 to 3,400. Even more intriguing is that players 2 and 4 had less health than the rest of the party on foot, but more health in their dolls. Maybe their model just naturally has more HP? And when those other party members run toward their dolls, it doesn't seem quite natural. The party looks to be following the main character's lead rather than following their own devices or even being controlled by another player. Otherwise, doll combat seems to be similar to on-foot combat. Even the doll seems to be able to replenish the fuel and TP by using its regular attacks, though it's worth noting that the amount is a lot less than what they're able to do on foot. But as we pointed out before, the dolls don't naturally lose fuel as they fight. Maybe it's only when they're flying. Once the Bronze Simius is defeated, a crystal appears to the right. It travels toward the player much quicker than these ever did in Xenoblade. Maybe it's because the dolls are larger or move faster. These also seem to have the same kind of swiftness the party had on foot. We can even see the player moving out of the way of an oncoming attack. Eventually, the player leaves his doll when it gets low on health, but that begs the question, what would happen if the doll's HP reached 0? Would he be forcibly ejected and have to pay for repairs later, or would he be considered knocked out? It's impossible to tell right now, but we do know that his OC gear is incredibly powerful, damaging the Bruno immensely despite his size. But what isn't clear, even from the description, is what the counter is. It doesn't go up with each hit, only every so often. Is more input required from the player when using this attack? It does bring down Bruno, which brings up an item drop menu. Unfortunately, there's not actually all that much to it. It mostly repeats in Japanese what's written there in English, as well as showing the names of defeated enemies. There's a bit about the treasure box, which is likely the item that was picked up after defeating the Bronze Simius, but it doesn't actually say what was in the box. As we can see, combat looks every bit as involved as Xenoblade Chronicles, but that's not the only thing to see in this trailer. The background holds several interesting details. Just behind the cliff face when fighting the Bronze Simius, you can see a metal wall, and you can even see the walls marked with letters that may spell out United that just kind of ends there. United Street? I guess it could technically be United States. Is it possible this area is right outside the town with a huge tower in the E3 trailer? It's pretty much confirmed when we see the same spikes from the final shot of the trailer in the background just a little later. Then there's the much more obvious dinosaur-like enemy drinking from the lake. Could this be the same dinosaur drinking from the lake in an earlier trailer? It was actually quite close to that town. Then there's the tall rock formation in the background. It looks just like the first moments of the first trailer for X. There are also simple touches like the bird flying across the sky as you fight, showing that this world is truly alive. And time is passing at a rate of 1 second of real time to 1 minute of in-game time. This battle takes time as the sun begins to set, the daylight indicator changes to evening. And with that, we've covered all the secrets and details we could find in X's gameplay trailer. Despite us not even knowing the game's official name yet, there's plenty to be excited about in X. This game looks beautiful, and even the small snippet of the area's musical theme that we get to hear is making me so excited. Of course, be sure to let us know if we missed anything in the comments. If you like this video, be sure to check out the guys at GameXplain on Facebook or follow them on Twitter. And if you want to see more of my videos, there is an easy-to-click link in the description below, as Andre would say. Thanks for watching, and be sure to stay tuned to GameXplain.com for more X and other things gaming too.